Hey everybody, welcome back. It's time for our Unit 5 walkthrough, and I'm going to try to make this quick, even though we have 3 assignments this week. So I know it's a little daunting, but try not to freak out. Um, our subject this week is awareness. Our theme this week is awareness, and we are focused on things like bias, self-advocacy, belonging, and inclusion. So, without further ado, let's talk about the readings and resources. This week, you have 3 chapters from the Johnson book that we always use. One is on researching to gather data. The second chapter, that's chapter 2 in the book. Chapter 6 is the basics of academic writing. And then chapter 9 is about reducing bias. One of the big things I want you to be thinking about this week is as we talk about bias is inescapable in some ways because we are all human and all humans have preferences and biases. But of course, we want to eliminate bias as much as possible when we are writing, and especially when we're writing for academic purposes. The next 2 resources will become one of them will become the topic for your essay. So in Unit 5, we are writing a full essay. This is the first time we've done that. Other of our assignments have been single paragraphs. So we're going to go over that. But of course, before you even get to that point, you're going to read a poem by J.S. Bacco and you're going to read an article by Bruder. Now, you're only going to write about one of those in your essay, but of course, you won't know which one you want to write about unless you read both of them. So read both of them. The other cool thing is if you do choose the poem, you do have the option of also watching the poet himself read the poem aloud, which is always kind of a cool thing. So keep an eye on those. The next resources focus on belonging and inclusion. And these are things that you're going to encounter in your journal this week, as well as the discussion board to a certain extent. So talking about things in the discussion board, you might want to bring some of this up as well. Anyway, let's take a look at the official assignments. In Unit 5, of course, you do also have a Unit 5 interactive exercise. If you have seen there was a note um, on the Ask the Instructor discussion board. Those do not receive a grade, so it doesn't let you submit it, but there's nobody to submit it to. I have let the school know that it's a problem, but don't worry about it because it doesn't affect your grade at all. All right, so the first item after the interactive will be, of course, the discussion board. As I usually propose, doing these things in order, you may want to get started on the writing assignment earlier this week. I definitely would not um, start it on Sunday. You are writing an essay, so this will probably take you a little bit longer than some of the other assignments have. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're planning out your week. In the discussion board this week, it's really just your personal reaction and how you feel like you're doing in the class so far. So in your post, you're going to focus on how do you feel about the course so far, this course. Um, every once in a while, somebody will talk about a different course they're taking. Focus on ours. What are some of the assignments that benefited you? What are some areas that you've struggled with in our class? And then point out one particular assignment. It could be a discussion board, it could be a writing assignment, doesn't really matter. It could be the vision board that you thought was interesting, helpful, or unexpected, and why, of course. Then, of course, back in replying to others, did any of the suggestions they made uh, make you kind of consider things in a different way? So, how important is it to reflect? And this is what we're really doing in the discussion board this week. The journal has 2 parts, and most of the journals are a single paragraph. This can also be all in one paragraph, but you do want to make sure that you cover both of the parts of the prompt. The first one focuses on stereotyping and bias. Have you ever been stereotyped or judged based on the way you speak or look? Do you ever wonder what you might do if faced with bias or if you felt you were being stereotyped unfairly? Please remember that this one is really asking you to share an actual experience. Um, I don't know of anybody who's never been stereotyped or judged based on the way they speak or look. So I think everybody will have at least one story that you can tell that focuses on this. The example that I always like to give is I was in graduate school and I was getting ready to go out on the job market. And so I needed to purchase a nice bag that I could carry with me to job interviews. And so I went to a department store. It's now Macy's. It wasn't called Macy's back then, but they bought it. And I went to the counter where you have to get the people to help you because the bag you want is behind the counter. And no one would wait on me. And it wasn't like they were busy. It wasn't like it was crazy. And the only thing I could figure is I much must have looked either too young or too poor or both to be purchasing one of those bags. Now, I don't know what they were really thinking, but that's the way that I took it. And so, what would I do in that situation? What I did do in that situation was demand somebody wait on me. Like I literally was like, "Can I please see that bag right there?" Which I don't think I should have had to do. But anyway, so share an example. The second part of this week's journal prompt is more theoretical, although some of you may have had experiences with this. Consider the following scenario. You think you've been given an unfair grade, but are not sure why. How do you proceed? Share the steps you would take. You could also think about this as getting an unfair review at work if you would prefer. But what should you do to advocate for yourself? So there's your journal entry. Like I said, you may want to make this 2 paragraphs just because, there's 2 separate things going on. And then we get, of course, to the writing assignment. The writing assignment this week is a short essay. It's 3 paragraphs long, and it's going to focus on either the poem or that article on belonging in the workplace. So you're going to have 3 paragraphs. The first one is going to focus on this question: what is the author trying to say about belonging and caring? So we've done this before. When you found an article about AI, you summarized the article, you talked about what the author was trying to get across. You're going to do the same thing with either the poem or the article. The second paragraph is going to focus on the next question, which is, according to the writer, what is one way to validate belonging and caring? So how can we make people feel like they belong, like you care about them? And then finally, the last paragraph will be, what is one challenge the writer explores about belonging and caring? Why is it hard? Okay. You will have at least 3 pages in this document because you will have your APA title page. You will have the essay, which starts on page 2 and is double spaced. And then you will for sure have a real APA reference page this time. We haven't had to have one of those before, at least not officially. But here's the good news. The citations for these articles are provided for you. All you have to do is copy and paste these, and these are the citations, which I'm going to show you when we look at a sample here, okay? So your document is going to have 3 or more pages. If your essay goes over a page, that's absolutely fine. You don't want to start the reference page until the very next page. So if you go on to page 3, then your reference page is going to be page 4, all right? So as usual, of course, you will want to carefully look at the rubric. We learned about rubrics in Unit 3, and this will help you to navigate, what you need to do in your essay. This one is a big one. We've had something like this before. If you have the title and reference pages, you will get all the points. If you do not have the title and reference pages, you will not get any of those points. So please, 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 if you need help with those, let me know. All right. Let's take a look at the sample. Well, let me open my sample. And I will share this sample with you. as well as always. Mm, mm, mm. Should have opened it first, but I didn't. Okay. There we go. All right. Let me reshare so you can actually see it. All right. So, Unit 5 is belonging and caring. So, you can call it whatever you want to, but this is the title I chose for the sample. You will include your full name, Department of English Post University, English 107, the power of words. None of that will change. I will go ahead and change this to Sunday's date as long as I can find Sunday's date because I can never remember off the top of my head. Sunday is the 23rd. Okay. So we're going to turn this into November 23rd because that's when it is due. All right. So that's first page. Second page, note, remember, you do have the title again at the top of page 2, and then you have your 3 paragraphs. Now, in the sample, I included the questions. You do not need to answer or to include the question, you just need to write about it. So you do not need to say, what is the author trying to say about belonging and caring? You can just write it. But I thought it might be helpful if you had the questions here so that you can remind yourself. Each of your paragraphs needs to be at least 3 full sentences, and that, of course, is part of the rubric. Below that, you're going to see the references. Now, you only need to have one reference, and that will be either the poem or the article. These are just copied from the course materials. You can copy and paste them. But you can also utilize some tools to help you create a works cited or a reference page. If you wanted to use the YouTube, for example, I went ahead and did the citation for you, although you would not have retrieved it on March 31st. But let me show you how I found that information. So we're going to open this YouTube. And this, of course, is part of the course. You'll watch the video. Even if you don't end up using the video in your document, you may just have the written poem. I'm going to pause this. We're going to copy this URL and we're going to open a website that I've talked to you guys about before. So scribber.com, you notice it's one of the first things that comes up. We're going to use the citation generator and it is set to APA, so it should be ready. Paste that in and hit the cite button. And this is the citation I get. Now, it's a little bit different from the one I used before. Either one of those is going to be okay, but if you want to use Scribber, you can, or if you just want to use what I already gave you, you can use that as well. So if you run into any questions this week, do not hesitate to reach out. I know this assignment is a little bit longer than we're used to, and so that can be a little scary and overwhelming, but you got this. 3 paragraphs, 3 sentences or more each. All right. I'll see you back here next week. Have a good one.